Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to the Simhanger. My name's Mark and thanks very much for joining me today. If you are watching, don't forget to say hello. Really appreciate the support. And today is something a little bit different for the channel really. It's more of an ad hoc live stream. Not something I normally do. We do run on the channel, we do run a monthly live stream which is a multiplayer event. But today's something a little bit different. Being a content creator on YouTube has many advantages. It also has a few disadvantages, and one of the problems I have is that I'm so busy creating content that I don't get to fly enough. And after all, the reason I love flight simulation is I get to fly. I'm no longer able to fly and fly in different aircraft and go to different parts of the world which I've never seen. So I've decided that on an ad hoc basis, maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 months or so, I'll do a live stream where we'll focus on flying an aircraft, have a look at the aircraft and fly a route. Now, talking about flying somewhere you've never been, that's not the case today, because we're in Africa, we are in southern Africa, and we're in Zimbabwe in fact, and we are at a little town called Chirundu, and we are here because it is a route that I've actually been on in the past, although I have never flown this particular route myself. And we're in the Dakota. It's the PA28 Dakota, the third of the 4 free aircraft to be awarded to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 owners as a result of the difficult launch, etc. But we won't harp on that issue right now. And I have never flown this aircraft, but I have flown this route. And I've flown it in a Cessna 206, and I flew the Harare to Chirundu route, and then my partner, not my partner, but my good friend then flew the Chirundu to Tashinga route, and that's the route that we are following today. The route is in the notes below the video if anybody's interested in it. But we'll just take a quick look at the route. But first and foremost, I'm just going to jump into the cockpit. There we are in the cockpit. Now this is the PA28 known as the Dakota, and it's Piper obviously, and this was one of a number of variants of the PA28 or 28 that was designed to compete with the Cessna 182. The PA28 line stretches right back to the 1960s or so, and but this particular version I think came out in the late 70s, towards the end of the 70s, was in production for about 20 odd years, and it was a step up from the previous version, if you like, which was the Cessna 235, which I think was known as the Pathfinder. Let's just jump outside again. And what was particularly distinctive about the Dakota was this tapered wing, slightly more powerful motor, which meant a little bit more speed, considerable improvement in terms of fuel economy, and it had slightly better climb performance. Now the aircraft that I flew this route, the Cessna 206, was similar in many aspects. It had fixed gear and it was piston single prop, so it's not too dissimilar. But jumping back in the cockpit again, if any of you have used any of the Just Flight Piper Arrow 3 or something of that nature, you will immediately you'll be familiar with this cockpit and know exactly what you're looking at. It's all very familiar and all very similar. One or two of the instruments in a slightly different place, and in this case 1 or 2 extra instruments. the Piper Arrow 3 from Just Flight, I must say, is one of my top 4 aircraft. I think the flight dynamics, I have flown the Piper Arrow 3 more than 25 years ago, and I've only got a couple of hours in it, literally a couple of hours, and I think that the Just Flight models are their Piper models are absolutely excellent and remain a favorite. This particular version is developed by Coronado, and it's very, very nicely rendered, as are all Coronado models. Lots of detail. Everything seems to work fairly well, and the only thing I would say in terms of the flight dynamics, from what I would expect, because I have to again say that I've never flown this aircraft myself directly, but let's just change the view here. Although I've never flown it, I do feel it's a little bit floaty on the descent and on the final approach, a little bit more than what I would have expected. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where we are. We are at Chirundu in Zimbabwe, and if we just have a quick look around, Chirundu is the main crossing point between Zimbabwe and Zambia, and that river that you can see stretching away in front of us, that is the Zambezi River, and that is the dividing line between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And if I can just show this up here, you can see here that's the Chirundu airstrip shown there, and you can see just how close the border is between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And you've got to be fairly careful when departing. It's runway 08 or 26, and if you're taking off on 26, you've got to be a little bit careful so that you don't run into Zambian airspace. Although interestingly, Chirundu is actually covered by the Lusaka FIR in terms of ATC, but anyway, we just have to be careful, and a lot of pilots who land here would very much prefer to take off on runway 08 and avoid any chance of infringement. But again, that will of course depend on the weather. Now our route today, let's just head back to where we were. Let's jump back in the cockpit, and I'm going to bring up the EFB, and the route is the exact route that I flew. So we go to the flight planner, and I'm just going to import the route quickly. This is my preferred way of loading a flight plan to avoid any potential problems, is to actually spawn at the airport that you want to fly at and then load your flight plan. So this shouldn't take me a moment. Let me find it. There it is, and let's load that flight plan. There it is. And what I'm going to do here is, although my avionics aren't on, I can still send it to my avionics, and hopefully it'll be there. And let's have a quick look at the route then. So let me just make that full screen. I hope that's clear enough. So here we are at Chirundu. We're going to depart. Now the weather is probably indicating we're going to take off 26, but we'll check the METAR again. I'm going to try and take off runway 08 if I can. And the route itself is VFR, of course, but this border here runs right down the center of the Zambezi River all the way to here, which is the Kariba Dam wall. And we'll be having a look at that a little bit further on in the flight. And we'll be flying over the Matusa Donna Mountains and stretching into the Matusa Donna Game Reserve, well known for all its wildlife and so on. The scenery that I'm using is just the default scenery. But the requirements are that we can't fly into Zambian airspace. And with the border being so close, what we actually need to do is stay at least 1 nautical mile and preferably 1.5 nautical miles away. So the reality is, in terms of the actual flight, we're probably going to take a path something like this all the way down till we're getting over the high ground. Then we're going to make a beeline for the only navigational point on our VFR flight, and that is Delta Whiskey. That's a Kariba NDB, and it's on a frequency of 300.00. Then we're going to be flying at about 229, 230 degrees, and we're going to, whoops, what happened there? We're then going to be crossing the lake quickly and heading to a safari lodge, an airstrip. Here it is here, and this is the safari lodge here called Fothergill Island. And interestingly, there's another one here called Spurwing. Now, in the map drawn here, you can see that it's part of the mainland, more or less, but in Sim it's not. When the water level in Kariba Lake itself is fairly high, it cuts off Fothergill and cuts off Spurwing. So we'll talk about that a little later on. Then, in fact, what we're going to do is fly this route along here, along the shoreline, just a little bit off before turning in and coming in at Tashinga, which is one of my all-time favorite fishing spots. There's a number of fishing camps dotted around here, mainly around this sort of area here, and I spent many a very happy extended weekend making sure I didn't get dehydrated, so we need to make sure we had plenty of suitable beverages. It wasn't tea and coffee, just to make sure that we didn't get dehydrated. So that's our flight plan. Okay, so thank you everybody for jumping in. I really do appreciate it. One of the reasons I'm doing this as opposed to a multiplayer is I don't often get a chance to interact with those on the chat. So a big welcome to Mike Coffey, big supporter of the channel. Thank you very much. Hey James Hudson, thanks for jumping in, my friend. Lima Bean, welcome. Overkill Simulations, welcome. For any of you that don't know Hudson or Overkill Simulations, they both have excellent YouTube channels and you should check them out. Hi to Sue D, Triforce Gamers, hi, how are you doing? RD Dry, hello, how are you, sir? Hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's get started. We've got 36 people watching at the moment, which is more than I expected, to be honest. I'm not running a checklist today. We will assume that the pre-flight has been done and that we've had the opportunity to check all our circuit breakers and so on. But using my somewhat rusty memory, so anything can happen on a stream, and no doubt I will make some mistakes, but we can quickly run through the startup procedure and get this baby going. I have my trusty co-pilot with me. I see she's in a leather jacket. Well, it's pretty much close to 30 degrees Celsius, so I'm not sure your choice of clothing was the right one, but hey, it is what it is. So we're just going to close the door and we're going to latch it. I've got the same amount of fuel in both my left and right tanks, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to choose my left tank to start off with, and I'm going to advance my mixture all the way. We're going to check that our parking brake is on, which it is. Mags are off, all looking good, so we can now put on our battery and we can put on our alternator, and we get a little bit of life into it. Now, depending on your circumstances, some people at this point would put on their nav lights. You would if it was dark, so that people could see there's somebody in the aircraft, but we're all alone here at the airstrip, so we can do that a little bit later. But what we will be doing is putting on our fuel pump. Now, you probably can't hear it, but that fuel pump is just whirring away a little bit, and just providing the necessary pressure that we need. Okay, so moving on. Mag, now I haven't primed it. I may need to prime it, I'm not sure. Because it's 30 degrees C, under normal circumstances you wouldn't need to prime it, but I'm not sure, so I'll probably just give it 2. Let's attempt to start, but the Dakota can be a little bit fussy about starting. And before we do so, I'm just going to crank the throttle. I'm going to open the quarter light here. We look clear. Clear prop. And here goes. No, I can tell she's not going to start. I'm going to give a little bit more throttle. Oh, and we have a start. Excellent. Just going to bring my throttle back down now. And if we have a look here, we just want to get the throttle to tick over at about 1,000 RPM or thereabouts. If it was fairly new aircraft, you'd probably be happy with about 800 thereabouts, but this is not a brand new one, so I think about 1,000 is going to be quite fine for us. And now I can go ahead and put on my anti-collision lights. I am using a number of peripherals, and can now put on my avionics. We just wait for those avionics to start up, and while we're waiting, we've got one NDB, if you recall, and that was on a frequency of 300. There it is, so we just switch that across. And I'm going to put it in again here. There, just in case we need it. Now let's see if we get the sim bug, which means that, yeah, we've got, if you get this with the GNS 530 or 430 where it starts and you're pressing the enter key to continue and it doesn't do it, just simply switch off and switch back on again. Very often that will overcome the problem. Today we're going to be we're going, despite let's just see if this is going to work, but while we're waiting, let's bring up our nav. All we're after really is to get, that's where we are in the world. I brought up Navigraph. We can just zoom in. I'm just looking for a METAR here. So this is Kariba METAR, because obviously these small dirt strips, there's no ATC, there's no individual METAR for them or anything like that, so we just want to get an idea. The wind has changed substantially, 230 degrees at 9 knots. That was 3 o'clock though, so some time ago. It's not totally up to date. Clear and visual, okay, so we don't really have much cloud to worry about. It should be clear under 5,000. It says temperature 24, dew point 14, and our QNH for our barrow is 1023. Okay, so what we can do, let's go back here. 1023 it says, so we can set our barrow. Now I know the altitude here, that is a little bit low, so I'm just going to change that to about 1025, I'm going to say, because that METAR is not fully up to date. So that looks about right to me. So we've set our barrow. Now let's see if our GNS is working. Yes, they are. So again, if you do get that problem, guys, just switch your avionics off and switch them back on again. Now today I'm using the GNS 530, which also functions as a 430 in the Flight Sim Builder, I've got the physical device on my desktop. It's one of my favorite instruments, so I'm just going to pop this one out by using the right Alt or Grand Alt and clicking. There it is. I'm just going to make that full screen. There we are. And now I can interact with the GNS 530, as you can see, directly. You have a number of different modes, of course, you can choose, and this is my favorite one here. And we can see it's 32 nautical miles to our destination. I beg your pardon, 32 nautical miles to our next waypoint, and we can see what that is. Let's just have a closer look. For the where you've got the 530 and the 430, it's always very handy that you can have the actual flight plan here. And let's do that again. Use the outer ring. We can see we're flying to the NDB, non-directional beacon, Delta Whiskey on 300, 32 nautical miles. Then on to Fothergill airstrip on a heading of 229, another 14 nautical miles. And then we're going to go on to Tashinga, Foxtrot Victor, Tango Alpha, and with a planned run landing at runway 19. So we're done with that. Back we go, and we are pretty much ready to go. Now, I'm just leaving my mixture back a little bit because I don't want to foul up too much. If we take a look, we're kicking up quite a bit of dirt. We don't want to get too dusty, so even though it's hot, I'm going to close the quarter light for now. We can now put on our pitot heat, even though in this temperature we probably don't need it, but we're going to stick that on. And we're going to put on our landing lights as well. Very common these days that for small GA aircraft flying, particularly at low altitudes, you tend to just keep your landing lights on. Okay. Right, so I think let's just have a look. What have we? We've got our avionics on. We can, of course, have a quick look at our PNTs. Oil pressure is up. Oil temperature is creeping up. We are charging. We have roughly the same amount of fuel in each tank. We are on the left tank, and we need to be cognizant of that. We don't want the aircraft to get unbalanced. It doesn't have an auto switching, so we're going to have to switch to the right tank at some point, not a problem. And fuel pressure is high because we've got our fuel pump on. If we were to turn our fuel pump off, we should see, because this is an electrical device, electrical fuel pump, we've still got fuel pressure, but it drops. And then as we increase the throttle, you can see the fuel pressure will increase. But the electrical fuel pump is a safety device, which we have just to make sure we got plenty of fuel pressure, and that's why we use it for landing, departure, and so on. So I think we are pretty much good to go. So let's take our parking brake off, and we can start to ease forward. Now it's quite a long runway. We've got quite a... Well, that is very rocky, isn't it? I love the ground textures in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. It really is impressive. I can tell you Chirundu's not quite... It's about as dusty, but not quite as rocky as this in the real world. We are going to depart runway 08, so please bear with me on that, despite the weather. But I think we don't have a 8 or 9 knot wind at the moment, looking at the trees. And we're just going to taxi and get ready for departure. But before we do so, just going to move over to the side a little bit. Now, of course, if you are flying this in the real world, or you wanted to imitate real world procedures, you'd have your radios on Unicom. Different countries have different frequencies for their Unicom, and you would be announcing your intentions and your movements, so anybody in the area on Unicom would be able to hear exactly what you're saying and know what you're doing. So typically it would be Sierra Hotel Foxtrot Sierra at Foxtrot Victor Charlie Delta Chirundu, taxiing runway 26 for lineup and departure runway 08. And then anybody on intercom would know exactly what you're doing. We're just going to pull over here. Based on the meta, I probably am facing into the wind, and I'm going to put on my parking brake, and we're just going to quickly do the run up. And the first thing we're going to do is push the mixture control all the way up and raise the throttle. And we are again looking at this instrument here, and we want to bring it to about, it varies depending on whose checklist or who you speak to, anything between 1800 and 2000. I'm going to use 2000 on this occasion. There we are, we're on 2000, and now I'm going to exercise the propeller, and what we should do is see a drop in the RPM. There it is. And what I was taught to do was do it twice. Let it build back up. And one for luck. So our prop is controlling the RPM, and the throttle is controlling the actual power. So that's all good. And now we can check our magnetos. First of all, I'm going to check the right magneto. And we've got a drop of about 200, which is a little more than I would expect actually. Normally you'd look for about 100, 150, but that's how it is. So back to both. Goes back to the 2000 RPM, and I'm going to check the left magneto now, and I'm looking for a drop within 50 RPM of the right one. That's almost bang on, so that's great. Back to both, let that build up, and then the last check that we need to do, just apply carb heat, go back. We've got a very slight drop here with carb heat, which is what we would expect. Up to about 50 would be fine. Certainly won't be needing carb heat here. And that is our run up complete, so bring our throttle right back to idle. Just going to pull back a little bit on my mixture because I don't want it to foul up and what have you and so on. So right, so let's take the parking brake off and let's get out of here. So for our route, the only thing we've got to remember, we've got to stay away from that Zambian ATC area. Now this is quite a long runway. Let me just line up properly. I'm just looking at my temperature gauge here before I depart, and I can see we're at about, I'm going to guess, about 27 or thereabouts. Feet are on the brake. A quick last minute check before we depart. Last opportunity to avoid disaster. Oil pressure's okay, oil temperature's there, yeah. Fuel in both tanks, and we've got pressure. Fuel pump is on, seat belts are on, parking brake is off, mixture to full, and we are ready to go. My coffee says I'll get Microsoft 2024 when get a new PC as well. Right now need to hang on to my quid. Mike, I know exactly what you mean. There is a bit of a performance requirement, but the visuals, as you can see, guys, have a look at this. I mean, this is default scenery. It's absolutely wonderful. And having done this flight myself, I can tell you the scenery and the game viewing opportunities when you're flying low is just absolutely awe-inspiring. So we have done everything. I think we are all checked. We got our tanks there. Now you could change to the right tank, but I'm going to leave it on the left tank. I don't think that we need to change. The fuel pump is on, everything's looking good. Let's get out of here. Now it's quite a long runway. Normally you would probably think about putting flaps down 1, but I'm not going to do that on this occasion. I feel I've got enough safety margin. If the temperature was around 38, 40 or thereabouts, I would probably apply 1, maybe even 2 stages of flap to help with the lift. But at this temperature I'm not going to, and the reason I'm not deploying flaps, again just following real world experience, is this is pretty rocky, pretty stony and dirty and gravel. You're going to get a lot of it kicking up, and it kicks up on the flaps and potentially can cause a little bit of scratching and what have you and damage. So I want to avoid that. So feet off, the brakes, make sure we're lined up, and slowly advance the throttle to full. Now we're going to be looking for about 75 knots to depart, but look at this powerful Lycoming motor. We're 55, 60 knots, 70 knots. We could rotate now. I'm just looking for a little bit extra. There's 75, and I'm pulling up. There's no gear to worry about now, no flaps to worry about. And what we're going to do, we're going to climb to 500 feet above the ground. So we're going to look at something around 1,700 to 1,800 feet, holding runway heading and climbing between 800 and 900 feet per minute. Looking good. I'm going to come back a little bit on my prop now because it's running at max, and because I'm not in a desperate hurry to climb, I'm going to bring it all the way back initially to 2,200 RPM. Takes a lot of pressure off the motor. There we are now 500 feet off above the ground. Nice little safety margin, and we can start our right hand turn. And what we're looking for is a visual on the Zambezi River. Looking at my speed, I'm going to come back a little bit now, and I'm going to bring my prop back to about 26. Whoops, let's keep that climb going now, Mark. We're looking for the Zambezi River. There we can see it, just out the corner there. So we're coming round. There we are. Okay. We're going to climb to 4,500 feet. I'm just going to adjust my altitude here. We're going to hand fly it more or less up to 4,500 feet. I'm very happy. This aircraft is more than capable of climbing at anything between 7, well, it can climb at 1,000 feet per minute actually, but I'm going to climb at about 700-800 feet, coming up on 3,000 feet shortly. There is the lake. I'm just going to angle a little bit away from it, And the reason I'm doing that, if we look out here, you can see the lake isn't, the river, I beg your pardon, twists and turns and comes right in here. We've got to maintain at least 1 nautical mile from the border. So we're just going to angle ourselves a little bit away from it. That looks about right. So I can just start to align. Looking at the NDB, now it hasn't kicked in yet, but as we gain height and close the distance, we should have that visual. Now past 3,000 feet, there is Zambezi River, land of hippos and crocodiles. In my misspent youth, I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity. One thing we can do quickly is let's switch off the fuel pump. In my misspent youth, one of the things I had was the opportunity to canoe down the Zambezi from just down from the dam wall down to Chirundu, and it was absolutely an amazing experience. It was absolutely fantastic. Really was magnificent. We got to the end of the escarpment in the first day and we camped there for reasons I'll tell you just now. And then the second day we flew the part of the we canoed the part of the Zambezi that you can see down to Chirundu, where we were picked up and returned to Harare. Real experience. This area that we're flying over here, of course, quite a lot of game. What is particularly noticeable about this area here, I'm just feeding in a little bit of trim, just take pressure off the yoke. Heading looks about right. We're coming up now on 4,500, so I'm going to bring my manifold pressure down to 22, which is perfect for cruise. My RPM, my prop is at 22, and at 4,500 feet looking good, and I should get about 130 knots thereabouts. Now at 4,500, so what I'm going to do is bring on the autopilot, brought on heading and altitude. Now normally you would hand fly this, but it gives me an opportunity to just have a chat and to interact with those of you that are watching. Any of you watching, please say hi. I really appreciate it. Now you'll have noticed that I have not adjusted my mixture, which I would have done a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to show you something here, and that's this little display here, which is very, very useful, and it's got a number of different modes that you can select, but I'm just going to leave it on this one, which is nautical mile and gallon. Now you can see I am using 14.9 gallons per hour, and this figure here means I'm getting 9.7 nautical miles per gallon. But of course, once you're up, you can bring back our mixture lever now, and can you see what's happening? The number of nautical miles per gallon is increasing as I'm reducing my fuel flow. And really what I'm going to look for is I'm going to pull it all the way back to about 10 thereabouts. I'm comfortable with that. You can bring it all quite a lot further. Don't bring it too far back or you'll cut the engine. This could end in disaster. Let's see. You hear those revs fall away? So for a safety margin, I'm going to come in at about 9.8, and that we've now gone from 9 nautical miles per gallon to 14.5 nautical miles per gallon. That's a whole lot cheaper, and we're coming up slowly but surely on about 130 nautical miles. Moose P, hey, how you doing, my friend? You found me in the world and you're following. You're very welcome, my friend. Thank you very much for joining me. And he is in the Piper Arrow 3, one of, as I mentioned, one of my most favorite aircraft in the world. Right. Well, we are quite safe, being, I think we're well over, we're probably about 2.5, maybe even 3 nautical miles from the Zambezi. If we have a look here, we can just change this and bring this. We should be heading on a heading of about 195 thereabouts. You can see that, and you can see here, let's just zoom in here, that we're not following this line because we want to stay away from the river, and that accordingly the deviation bar is showing that the planned GPS route is to our right, and it's to our right, so that all makes sense. We're very happy with that. Now that we're at cruise, quick check, let's have a look. Oil pressure looking good, oil temperature looking good. We've still got a charge. We've got enough in both main tanks. We must bear in mind we need to change tanks fairly soon, and oil pressure looking good. The one other thing that you can check, let's change the view, just have a look. Vacuum, you're looking for something between 3.5 and 4, maybe 4.3. Yeah, enough vacuum, and that vacuum is what drives a lot of your steam gauges. So let's see, remember, hold the yoke back until attaining airspeed. Yep, hello from Norway. Mr. Kaval, is it? Or Vale, Kaval? How you doing? Thanks for joining us. Mr. TPHI, another Discord member, how you doing? Hello, thanks for joining me. Mike Coffee, we've said hello already. Ed Ryder, how you doing, sir? Nice to meet you. Hi Mark, he says. Hi Mark, do you use the Moser force feedback yoke? Does it add a lot to immersion? Well, yes it does. Right now I'm flying with the FlightSim.com CLS60 force feedback yoke, but I do use the Moser. The reason I'm not using the Moser right now is because that's on my motion rig, and when I'm streaming I don't use my motion rig. So I've got my CLS60 on here. Great one. I'm often asked which is better between the two. Just quickly here, you can see the Zambezi snaking off here. You can see the NDB has now picked up and pointing over there. This is Kariba over here, and very shortly we'll be turning and heading directly in to head over the NDB. But I'm often asked CLS60 or Moser. Well, the Moser is cheaper. It's more, it's much more kinder in terms of the amount of space that it takes, rather than the CLS60, which is a large beast. In terms of configurization and usability and what have you, the CLS60 currently, Moser is steadily improving, but the CLS60 gives you a more realistic impression, feedback and sense of realism, but Moser is coming along at a very rapid pace. For general force feedback and for use with different types of aircraft on a regular basis, you're probably going to be better off with the Moser. You want something tailored for a couple of aircraft that you fly, and you're going to spend the time and tune in those profiles to the nth degree. Well, the CLS60's got to be your choice. We've now changed our heading, and we are now heading directly towards the NDB. We're still far enough away from the Zambezi River. This is the gorge here, absolutely amazing. And the reason we camped right here at the mouth of the gorge is so that we could camp with high ground behind us. And the reason we wanted to do that was in this area you get a lot of elephant, you get a lot of lion, you have cheetah, you have a lot of baboons, vervet monkeys and that type of thing. But the one animal we were most scared of was buffalo. And that is because they run in herds. They are, generally speaking, bad-tempered buggers, to be honest. And yeah, we wanted to be and camp in a place where we didn't have any risk of a herd of buffalo coming down to water late in the evening, which they often tend to do. Hello Andy Gilbert, 95 Flyer, hello, how are you? Thanks for joining us. Sergio, welcome my friend, nice to have you here. We're now heading directly towards, we can just towards Delta Whiskey. We can just bring up our EFB. We can see where we are. Here is the lake, and we are going to be heading from here, then changing direction and going over Fothergill. Now here you can see Zimbabwe Dam, beg your pardon, Kariba Dam. This has hydroelectric power stations on the Zimbabwe side and on the Zambian side, so it provides hydroelectric power for both countries independently. It was built in the late 50s, I think it was, and it was built predominantly by the Italians. All this is a freshwater lake, and this was just the Zambezi River, but when they dammed it, it then created the lake. Over here is Kariba, the actual airport for Kariba. We have to stay out of that, and we would have had to have asked for special permission to cross over this NDB had it been in the real world. Otherwise they would have placed us in hold a little bit further back over the high ground until such time it was okay for us to clear. Now switching to the external view, there's Kariba. This is a bit of the commercial area and what have you. These are fish farms here, and this is Kariba, and as we fly past you'll be able to see, so you've got some buildings up here. Again, it's default scenery, but some hotels up here, but most of the hotels are over here on this high ground here. Some very nice hotels. This here harbour here is called Andorra Harbour, and that is the sort of commercial harbour, and this one here is called Kariba Bay, and that is more the private harbour. And here we would board our houseboat and go out for some very, very lovely weather. Go out for some lovely time, spend some long weekends, particularly if the weather was lovely as it is now. I can see there's a couple of boats on the lake already. I think we should be turning about now, so let's just jump back in the cockpit and let's just change direction now. On a heading of about 230 or thereabouts, 229, and where we're heading is directly here to Fothergill Island. That's Fothergill, and as you can see in the sim at the moment, it's currently an island. The rainfall in Kariba lately, the last couple of years, hasn't been what we'd have wanted it to be, and subsequently it's currently, I believe, I stand to be corrected, but last I heard it is now joined to the mainland, as is Spurwing, which is over here. This is a safari camp catering for tourists. Spurwing is more of a luxury lodge, whereas this is more of a rustic type of setup. Let's just bring back this. So we're going to fly just past Fothergill, and then we're going to come along here to land at Tashinga. What I wanted to do was just mention that there's a number of small airports all together. We're landing here at Tashinga, and then we're going to go. I've got my fishing rod and crates of beer in the back, and will be picked up by Land Rover and taken to a number of the fishing camps. But there are a number of other airports here, or airstrips. This is Boomy Hills. This serves a 3 or 4 star hotel. We've got this one here, which is Rukari, and we've got this one here, which is Tiger Bay. Tiger Bay, the actual lodge, once again a tourist destination, is down here somewhere, I believe. Luxury lodge, very, very nice. And if any of you watching are keen fishermen, then you'll probably know about tigerfish. They're real fighters, and this area here is known as the Red Cliffs, and you get the most exceptional and large tigerfish here. Really fantastic experience. I just want to have a look at Rukari. If you have a look at Rukari, you will see there's some odd structures here, and I wonder what that is. That is a crocodile farm. Now, it was established for commercial purposes way back when, but it also had the task of, let's just center on this, it also had the task of restocking the lake because it was felt the lake didn't have enough crocodiles in. They overstocked it, to be honest, and subsequently what happened, the water levels have dropped significantly, and now they have too many crocodiles in the lake. And I believe, the last I heard, they have on average 1 crocodile per every 100 square meters, which is quite a lot. And just to put that in perspective, this is Kariba Lake here. It's about 17 to 19 kilometers at its widest point, and about 360 kilometers long. So there's a fair number of crocs. If we then continue to follow the Zambezi River line, we will of course come to Victoria Falls. But enough of that. We now have visual of the strip, and this is the dirt strip that serves Fothergill Island. There it is. We won't fly over it. Again, we would be announcing our intentions on Unicom. If we dropped down and we flew low over or close to the airport, that would indicate that we're going to land, or those there would assume you would land, simply because and assume perhaps you had a comms problem and what have you. It's quite normal practice for us, for pilots flying in this sort of environment, to fly over the airport for a number of reasons, not least of which, of course, you got to make sure, because there's no ATC or anything, you got to make sure that it's clear of elephant and anything else that may be there. The thing we most looked out for was one of the game rangers that had suddenly decided to park his Land Rover in the middle of one of the airstrips. Okay. Now, this area here, this is the Matusadona range here, and a large portion of this is all national park. This area here, and you'll get to see it as we get closer, this was the most perfect spot to look at elephants. These spurs that stuck out, the elephants love to come on there, go in the water and cool off before heading back inland for the evening, and very often not only just into the thicket but back into the high ground, and then the next morning and evening they would come down. Well, we are past our point now, and we're now heading towards the airport, so the autopilot's coming off. I'm going to pull back a little bit on the throttle, and I'm just going to push that mixture forward a tad, and we need to start, I'm just going to trim in a little bit, we need to start descending. We want to approach, what are we, 12 nautical miles, so perfect timing to start our descent. We want to approach Tashinga runway 19. We're going to want to turn on to final at about somewhere between 2,700 feet, thereabouts. So we want a steady descent. Airspeed's okay for now, but as we get closer we'll start to wash off that airspeed. I'm going to use 2 stages of flaps. I want to turn on to final at about 85 knots or thereabouts, come over the threshold at about 70 knots with 2 stages of flaps, flare and touchdown just a tad under 60 knots if we get it right. But of course there's no way that I can guarantee that I'll get it right. Okay. My coffee's saying you can never have too much Crocs. Well, you might have a different opinion if you wanted to have a swim here, Mike. Needless to say that swimming in Lake Kariba is not recommended. I mentioned that this was a man-made lake. At one time it was the biggest man-made lake in the world. I still think it ranks fairly high, but it's certainly not the biggest one. But one interesting anomaly, this is where all the elephants would be here, and occasionally you'd get a chance to see lion as well. When they flooded this area here to create this huge water resource for both countries, obviously they had to move people out and resettle and rehome them, which they did. But a lot of the trees they expected would slowly but surely disintegrate, become waterlogged and fall away. Slowly but surely they would rot and disappear. Now, although the sim and the scenery in the sim doesn't show it, that actually didn't happen in most of the areas, particularly closer to shore. What happened were the trees fossilized. So this is also a favorite area to bring your houseboats for the evening and to dock and what have you. But getting in and out, particularly closer to shore, you had to be very careful indeed, because you could hit the tree stumps and that would damage your prop. Now Tashinga is just here. We're just running along there. That's a dirt strip, so we're not far. How are we doing? We've still got about 500 feet to lose. We're down to about 90 knots or thereabouts. We're coming down at 400 or 500 feet per minute because no desperate hurry. Looking good. I'm going to use the same barrow pressure that we got from Kariba. Not going to change that. Assume that that's all okay. 90 knots, sitting pretty. You could just see Tashinga there. Quite a long strip. It's a bit different from the days that I used to go to Tashinga. Tashinga was pretty renowned as being a fairly difficult place to land at. And I personally had a couple of hairy moments, and that is because it was quite heavily treed. But if we look, and this is unusual for Microsoft Flight Simulator, that not many trees at all. So I went on to Google Maps and had a look, and sure enough, we'll be turning base very shortly. $2,800. We should be about right. Let's prepare for landing. So I'm going to put my prop and mixture to full. I'm going to put on my fuel pump again. I'm going to start my turn for final. Going to continue my descent. If you find you're a little bit high, then you can always just slightly delay the turn for the final. Just gives you that little bit extra time in order to get yourself lined up, which is what I've done on this occasion. Seatbelts on. How you doing, my dear, in that leather jacket? Looking good? "90 knots. I'm going to bring in first stage of flaps now. Landing lights are on. Prop. Mixture. Now at about 85 knots, which is fine. Continuing a slow descent. We are 2.4 nautical miles based on the GPS we can see here on the GNS 530. And we are pretty much good to go. I am using Sim Update 3, of course. First stage of flaps, and now bringing in this second stage of flaps. My main focus now is on my airspeed. Altitude's fine. Winds are pretty calm, to be honest, despite the METAR. I am on live weather, but I'm not on live time. Moose P's following me in. Focus mark. A little bit higher than I want it to be, but we're okay. When I come over this threshold at about, I wanted about 70 knots or thereabouts. We're about right. I'm coming fully back on the power now. Not really flaring. I'm just going to hold a level. I'm going to let that speed wash off. 60 knots now. Very nice. And we'll touch down shortly. And we're down. Just let it roll a little bit. Flaps up. And some manual braking. Okay. The one thing you don't want to do when you land at strips like this, very often you may be tempted to park right at the end of the strip. Well, you don't want to do that, because if somebody has a little bit of a problem in terms of landing or a late go around or something like that, well, it could all end up in tears. So it's always a good idea to get yourself off the runway and park somewhere safe, particularly for uncontrolled airstrips. Moose P is down, and I think I'm going to park somewhere pretty similar. Now that we've landed, we can take our landing lights off. We can get our pitot heat off, and we can whoops, a little bit aggressive on the brakes there. And we can get our fuel pump off. I can bring my mixture back a little bit just so I don't clog up. And we got Moose P here, and I think he's chosen a pretty good place to park. So I think I will do likewise. gently as we go. He won't forgive me if I clip his wing. And we're done. Throttle to idle. Okay, so let us put our parking brake on first and foremost, and our avionics can come off. We don't need those, and we can now start our shutdown procedure. And very straightforward and simple in this aircraft. We can now kill the engine. Let's cut the fuel off. Mags go to off. Fuel can come off, and where our lights can come off. That's all looking good. We can open our quarter light again, get some air in so we don't fog up, and we can take the alternator off, and we can kill. And there we are. We are here, safe and sound. And open the door. And there's Moose P. Don't forget the beers, mate. If you give me a hand with a crate, it'd be greatly appreciated. Where are you going? I think he's really keen to get fishing. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. Hudson, James, you're saying a new update has apparently just dropped for Sim Update 3. Yeah, I know it just has, because as I started to prepare for the stream, started up the sim, I had a 500 megabyte download. Triforce Gamers, hi Mark, is the RTX 5090 the solution to get rid of all the stuttering? Kind regards. No, it isn't, to be honest, but it goes a long way. It is a beast of a card, both in size and performance. But a lot of the stuttering that will relate to your in-sim settings, and also, dare I say, that it is part and parcel of the VRAM issues that the sim has. And that is to say that the way VRAM is like a conveyor belt, it feeds information in, and when it's done with it, it dispenses with it, and as it needs more information, it brings that in turn, and it's just not doing that fast enough. There's too much information required at VRAM at times, creating the problem. Now, Asobo are working on it. Developers are also working on it by using slightly lower textures, which won't change the visual fidelity of the sim, that type of thing. The number of LODs or level of detail in your texturing, all that is part and parcel of it. So, yeah. So, everybody, I really do appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much indeed. If you like the stream, please just give it, just drop a note in the comments and say thank you very much. Or if you didn't, do the same and let me know whether or not I should do this sort of thing again. So until next time, everybody, thank you very much. See you soon.